Welcome to Archive Vault, where we explore declassified records, hidden histories, and state-level investigations. Please note, some illustrative narration is AI-generated for storytelling purposes. All content is educational and documentary-based. In the early years of the 19th century, in the south of France, there lived a man whose name would disappear from history almost as completely as he himself once vanished from society. His name was François Picaud. In some records, he is called Pierre Picaud. The inconsistency itself is part of the story. What is documented is this: he was a shoemaker from the city of Nîmes, not a nobleman, not a soldier, not a political figure, a tradesman, skilled, respected, quietly prosperous. By 1807, Picaud's circumstances had changed. He was engaged to be married to a woman described in police memoirs as both beautiful and wealthy. The marriage promised security, social advancement, and entry into a higher economic tier than that of an ordinary craftsman. This detail matters because in Napoleonic France, upward movement was visible, and visibility attracted attention. Among Picaud's acquaintances were several men who shared his social circle. They dined together. They spoke freely. They were, by all outward appearances, friends. Their names appear later in police records: Mathieu Lupion, Guillaume Solari, Mathieu Chaubard, and a fourth man, Antoine Alou. What separated Alou from the others was not innocence, but silence. According to the account preserved in the Paris police archives, jealousy formed slowly. Not sudden rage, but prolonged resentment. Picaud's impending marriage became a focal point. The dowry, the future, the sense that fortune had chosen one man and not the others. France at the time was at war with Britain. Suspicion was currency. Accusation was a weapon. A letter was written, anonymous, precise, damning. It accused François Picaud of being an English agent, a spy. In Napoleonic France, this was not a rumor. It was a death sentence disguised as paperwork. No trial followed, no confrontation, no explanation. On the eve of his wedding, close enough that preparations were already underway, Picaud was arrested quietly, taken without public record, removed without announcement. For the first months of his imprisonment, he did not know why he had been taken. There was no charge sheet presented to him, no interrogation that clarified his crime, only confinement. The location of his imprisonment would later be identified as the fortress of Fenestrelle, high in the Alps. A military prison, remote, severe, designed not for justice, but for disappearance. Picaud would remain there for 7 years. During that time, life outside continued. His fiancée, believing him lost or dead, eventually married another man. That man, according to the same police account, was Mathieu Lupion. Inside the fortress, Picaud aged. He reflected. He waited. And at some point during his confinement, a neighboring prisoner became aware of him, an elderly Italian cleric, a man of education, a man who, like Picaud, had been imprisoned without hope of release. Their interaction would alter the trajectory of everything that followed. But that belongs to the next part of the record. For now, the archive holds this moment. A man accused without evidence, arrested without trial, removed without explanation, and a betrayal that had already begun to reshape lives long before its consequences would surface. François Picaud entered the fortress of Fenestrelle, a man of relative youth and promise. By the records preserved in the Paris police archives, he had not yet reached 30. By the end of his imprisonment, he would be changed in ways that would never again allow him to return to his previous life. The fortress itself was a remote construction in the Alps, now in modern-day Piedmont, Italy. Isolated, fortified, and severe, it was designed to remove undesirables from sight, not to rehabilitate or to explain the reasons for their confinement. Guards came and went. Food arrived sporadically. Messages from the outside world were non-existent. For the first 2 years, the archives note, Picaud did not know the reason for his imprisonment. Days and months blended together. He was held in solitary cells at times, sometimes with other prisoners. Records suggest he attempted to communicate with his fellow detainees, learning their stories and sharing his own. But always the shadow of uncertainty hung over him. One prisoner, elderly and Italian, came to occupy a neighboring cell. According to police memoirs, he was a cleric, sometimes described as a Milanese abbot, sometimes referred to as Father Torri. Like Picaud, he had been abandoned by family, imprisoned without apparent cause, and faced the end of his life confined by stone walls and iron bars. The archives emphasize that the two men formed a bond, a relationship built on necessity, trust, and shared isolation. Picaud came to regard the priest as a father figure. In turn, the priest provided guidance, counsel, and a connection to knowledge otherwise unavailable within the fortress. Over the years, Picaud adapted to the rhythm of imprisonment, the monotony of the days, the whispers of other prisoners, the occasional reports of events outside. All of it formed a background against which he began to think in terms of patience and observation. He learned what he could about those who had betrayed him, even if only through indirect accounts or rumors reaching the fortress. It was during these years, according to the memoirs, that the priest revealed a secret. On his deathbed, he disclosed the location of a hidden treasure in Milan. Gold, jewels, and valuables, all left unclaimed and protected. The priest bequeathed this knowledge to Picaud, framing it as both a legacy and a tool for the future. The records do not explain how the priest had come by this fortune, only that it existed and that Picaud would be its inheritor. In 1814, after 7 years of confinement, the archives report that Picaud was released. The political landscape had shifted, Napoleon's empire had fallen, the Bourbon monarchy was restored, and prisoners long held under suspicion or accusation were being freed. Picaud emerged from the fortress not merely a free man, but a man in possession of knowledge that would alter the course of his life forever. The police records note that he did not immediately seek retribution. First came preparation, observation, and the retrieval of the treasure hidden in Milan. By all accounts, this marked a transformation, from shoemaker to wealthy, anonymous figure. His identity, once known and betrayed, would now be concealed under various names and guises. For now, the archives end this part with the observation that the man who entered Fenestrelle was no longer the same as the man who walked out. What followed would be a carefully plotted course, one that would reach into the lives of those who had once betrayed him and change them forever. After 7 years behind the walls of Fenestrelle, François Picaud stepped into freedom with a singular advantage, the knowledge of a treasure hidden far from France. The archives describe it as a collection of diamonds, coins, and valuables, concealed in Milan and carefully preserved by the dying priest who had befriended him in prison. Records indicate that Picaud did not rush. He traveled discreetly, ensuring that no trace of his movements or intentions reached those who might suspect him. He retrieved the treasure, securing it entirely for himself. The police memoirs emphasize the meticulous nature of this acquisition. Every detail planned, every obstacle anticipated, every moment observed in silence. With wealth in hand, Picaud assumed new identities. Various police documents later reference names he used to move through cities without recognition. His former status as a shoemaker had been erased. The man who had been confined and betrayed was now a figure capable of operating unseen, a shadow moving in circles of power and commerce previously beyond his reach. For a decade, according to the memoirs, Picaud observed, he maintained discretion, building networks, gathering information about those who had wronged him. Mathieu Lupien, Guillaume Solari, Mathieu Chaubard, and even the silent witness Antoine Alou remained within his sphere of attention. Each would become a subject of careful study, their lives examined for weaknesses, habits, and vulnerabilities. The records indicate that Picaud's wealth was not flaunted. He used it strategically, both as a shield and as a tool. Financial resources, connections, and social appearances were carefully calibrated. He moved in and out of Paris, Milan, and other locales with purpose, never losing sight of the ultimate objective recorded in police accounts: the restitution of personal justice or vengeance for the wrongs he had endured. The memoirs note that he adopted disguises and aliases. At times he presented as a merchant, at others as a man of learning or refinement. Each persona allowed him to gather information, penetrate social circles, and monitor the lives of his former betrayers without drawing attention to himself. By the end of this period, Picaud had positioned himself as a man of immense wealth, nearly invisible yet omniscient regarding the affairs of those who had conspired against him. He had returned from imprisonment not merely restored, but transformed into a figure capable of executing plans that the archives later describe as intricate and methodical. The records close this section with a note on patience. Picaud, though free and wealthy, waited for the precise moment to act. The stage was set for a series of events that would alter the fortunes of those who had once betrayed him and leave a mark on the historical record that would echo for decades. The records preserved in the Paris police archives describe a man transformed. François Picaud, once a shoemaker imprisoned without cause, now possessed wealth, knowledge, and patience. He had returned to society under multiple aliases, each carefully constructed to conceal his identity and intentions. According to police memoirs, he began a campaign against those who had betrayed him: the three men who had orchestrated his false arrest, and the one who had remained silent. Each action was deliberate, recorded with attention to detail, and targeted toward the individuals and their families. Mathieu Chaubard was one of the first to face his retribution. The records suggest that Picaud arranged for Chaubard's death. Accounts describe a stabbing, direct, unambiguous, and final. Guillaume Solari followed. Memoirs note that Picaud's actions led to Solari's illness and eventual demise. Whether through poisoning or induced despair, the archives are explicit that Solari did not survive the consequences of Picaud's plans. Mathieu Lupien, who had married Picaud's former fiancée, became the focus of multiple interventions. According to the records, Picaud manipulated events involving Lupien's daughter, ensuring she married a criminal. The resulting scandal led to her arrest and, according to police accounts, her death from shock. Lupien's son was implicated in crimes such as theft, framed by circumstances orchestrated by Picaud. Lupien's business, a restaurant or shop, was destroyed by fire, leaving him impoverished and publicly disgraced. The archives also indicate that Picaud acted with precision, orchestrating sequences that extended beyond immediate retribution. Every step appears to have been planned to maximize consequence, while maintaining anonymity until the actions were complete. Antoine Alou, who had known of the original betrayal but had remained silent, was observed in the records as a later participant in Picaud's downfall. At this stage, however, the memoirs note that Alou remained on the periphery, unaware of the full extent of the schemes unfolding against his former companions. The memoirs emphasize the duration of these events. Picaud did not act impulsively. Months and years of observation preceded every decisive action. The result, according to the archival account, was the systematic ruin or death of those who had conspired against him. By the end of this phase, François Picaud had executed what the police documents describe as a meticulous, multi-year campaign. Every action recorded in the memoirs is noted with attention to date, method, and outcome, providing a chronological account of events that extended across cities and families. The records close this section, noting the quiet and unseen nature of the man who had returned from imprisonment. Though active in society, he remained largely undetected, moving under disguises, observing and acting according to plans formulated over years of patient calculation. After years of careful planning, François Picaud's campaign of revenge reached its conclusion. The Paris police archives record that he confided parts of his story to Antoine Alou, the man who had known of the original betrayal but had remained silent. Alou, motivated by greed, abducted Picaud, and demanded money in exchange for his life. Picaud refused. He was fatally wounded during the abduction and later found by authorities. In his final moments, he reportedly gave a detailed confession, recounting his imprisonment, the priest's bequest, the recovery of the hidden treasure, and the acts of retribution carried out over the previous decade. Alut, in turn, made a deathbed confession, providing additional details to the police records. Some accounts even mention extraordinary events, including the presence of Father Torre's ghost during imprisonment, though the archives record this without explanation. The memoirs preserve dates, names, actions, and outcomes in careful sequence. They describe Picaud's life, his transformation in prison, his return under multiple identities, and the systematic execution of his revenge. It is clear from the archives that a man once confined and betrayed acted entirely according to his own designs, and that the consequences of those actions were meticulously documented. In listening to the story, one can recognize that most of what is recorded comes directly from official police records and memoirs, though some dramatic or extraordinary details like ghostly appearances or unusual coincidences appear alongside the factual sequence. Still, the archives preserve the life of François Picaud as it unfolded, offering a record of betrayal, imprisonment, wealth, and carefully executed vengeance. Ending with his violent death. The archival record leaves the story as it was documented. A man wronged, transformed by time and circumstance, acting with patience, intelligence, and precision, with every consequence preserved for posterity. Thank you for listening to Archive Vault Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive and found it insightful. Wishing you a great week ahead, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. We'll be back soon with more stories from the archives. See you next time.